him definitely will be enriching our knowledge. So it is we should take this as an opportunity, and we should think of enriching ourselves from the lecture delivered by Professor Mohammed. Now I request Professor Mohin Mohammed to deliver his lecture on the philosophy of Socrates. Welcome,
Uh,
Professor Mohammed. Please deliver
Thank
your
you.
lecture.
Thank you, Om. Distinguished participants. In last session, I talked about the Greek Socratics, particularly the natural philosophers. They are also called the agenetists. Uh, their primary job was just to inquire about the underlying nature and structure of the world and the things therein we come across. Uh, Actually, today I will just take up Socrates, but before that, I will just talk few things about the sophist, because normally the students of history of philosophy, they neglect this brand of philosophy because it doesn't have much influence in the future course of philosophical enterprise. uh, you know, sophists, they have actually made a U-turn, made a departure from the natural philosophy. Okay, and their philosophy was accepted, and it has got some influence over the youths of that time. Actually, they emerged in a situation where the Peloponnesian War uh, was just over, and there was a great upheaval, a disturbance in the intellectual climate of the Greece, particularly by the particularly in the this towards the end of 5th century BC and start of 4th century BC. A doubt was cast in the natural philosopher's ability so as to find the exact nature of the first principle out of which everything come into being. This is quite evident in the diversity of opinions and lack of agreement among the natural philosopher about the nature of archetype or first principle. Because it is quite evident that some like Thales, they told that ultimate principle is water. For Anaximanders, it is for Anaximanders, it is just the Apeiron or the boundless, and for Anaximenes, it is uh, for Anaximenes, it is just the air. For Heraclitus, it is the fire. For Democritus, it is the atoms, and for Parmenides, it is the uh, being. So there is a diversity of opinions, and they are not able to come to a definite agreement as to what exactly constitutes the underlying principle of the things of the world. It is because that perhaps due to the human faculty of thought is limited, and thus unable to handle the problems propounded by the cosmologist. So there was a temporary depreciation of cosmological contemplation. In such an atmosphere, there was a shift in the intellectual atmosphere. It was further worsened by the onset of chaotic democratic situation prevailing in ancient Greece. Uh, because democracy is an ideal, but democracy involves freedom of speech, and many people, they misuse their freedom of speech and make a mess of the entire affairs of the state. At this particular time, there emerged a new brand of nomadic preachers called sophists. The word sophist is also derived from the Sophia, from the Greek word Sophia. Sophia, as we know, it stands for wisdom. But wisdom specially, but wisdom was used in a good sense, that is, especially in human affairs, wisdom in human affairs like politics, in household management, in administration, in management. It is a kind of wisdom actually without word, only wisdom. They are not able to translate into action, but it was just wisdom only in thought. It is a kind of wisdom which Homer and Hesiod first use in their poetry, and they have used in its in the sense of a verb, that is sophizo. Sophizo is a Greek word that means to instruct or to impart something. The sophist, there are various kinds of sophists, actually gymnosophists, material sophists, rhetoricians. There are various kinds of sophists. That is a very interesting. They have a notion of naked sophist, which particularly they refer it to the Indian philosophers. But the primary job of sophist to impart rhetorics. So they have a vast influence. Rhetorics, rhetorics is a kind of verbosity that I will discuss it, what rhetoric in detail. How it teaches how to win a debate and improvement of language ability and eloquence. So they have a vast influence among the youths who were aspirant for winning elections and to excel in administration and management. They claim to teach arete. Arete is a Greek word that stands for excellence, and hold that excellence is not a result of their training, rather than it is excellence. Actually, sophists, they hold that excellence is it is a product of training, not it is one is endowed it from its very birth. So it is they actually enhance the persuasive power of the speaker by developing their linguistic ability. They have a good command over. They teach how to have a command over language and how to persuade people to accept your assertion or your claim or your opinion. It seems to be a philosophy of exigency. That means whatever helps you to get or to achieve something in a very short term, that is actually being taught by the sophist. The main contribution, it seems, to the main contribution of the sophist is to extend and is to teach how to argue, and in other words, the art of argumentation, and their only purpose in argumentation, only to defeat the opponent by employing a technique called dosai logi. Dosi logi means theory. This is a technique that if you argue that X is P with certain argument, with certain basis, then at the same time, you can also argue that X is not P with equal force. So this is in doing this, in teaching this argumentation, they seems to argue for the sake of argument. I mean, without having any genuine concern for truth. However, the sophists were criticized for various reasons. It is, of course, it is not a great philosophy and it doesn't have much influence afterwards, and posterity didn't take them so seriously. There are so many reasons for this. Firstly, these teachers, these nomadic teachers, they charge a substantial amount of money for teaching and imparting for imparting the argument, the art of argumentation to the people. So that means they teach only to those who belong to a very influential background and financial background, or who occupy a certain high position in the society. So they are teaching confined to those people because the ordinary people, the common people, they are unable to afford their charges. Secondly, they employed rhetorics, which is an art of making arguments where opponent is made confused by the verbosity of the speaker and by dragging him to different fallacious positions. This is exactly what rhetoric does mean. Thirdly, they are said to be quite relativist. They believe in subjective truth rather than the objective one. They hold perception is the only reality. According to them, there is no objective truth. Truth is always subjective, and it is subject to place, time, and person. What is true to me may not be true to you. What is true today may not be true tomorrow. What is true here may not be true there. So they don't have any abiding kind of objectivity, abide knowledge, abide objectivity. That's why I have told earlier that they believe in the exigency of the situation. In this context, we can take into account the views of two very popular sophists like Protagoras and Gorgias. Of course, there are so many sophists, and quite interestingly, Plato, in all his dialogue, put all these sophists against the Socratics while they were going through, they were undergoing a process of dialectic. Protagoras, as we know, is very famous for his statement that none is the measure of everything. Homo mensura. That is, in Greek, it is called homo mensura. That means none is measure of everything. Here in Protagoras, the term man does not refer to any genus man, rather a man as an individual. The individual is a law unto himself in this context in matters of knowledge. So whatever I say, I am true. Whatever you say, you are also true. So every point of view is held as true, and even if they are opposed to each other. So knowledge is perspective oriented, and actually this is the approach. The approach has been taken. I mean, the postmodern philosophers, of course, their purpose was not very negative. They are also unlike these sophists, the postmodern philosophers, they are the seeker of the truth. But here, the sophists, they don't bother, or they don't have any concern for the truth. There is another sophist, very renowned sophist, that is Gorgias. Another popular sophist, Gorgias, he pursued an extremely nihilistic position that there exists nothing, even if they exist, we could not know it, and thereby we could not communicate to others. According to Gorgias, all values are baseless. Aristotle calls him the master of rhetorics. He taught an oratory that is persuasively ironic. He recommended responding seriousness with jest and jest with seriousness. He blurs, actually, by doing this, he blurs the line between serious philosophical discourse and satire. So, but despite all this negativity and skeptical approach of the Socrates towards knowledge, a sophist towards knowledge, they have some positive contributions. In their art of rhetorics, they have exhibited the elements of the dialectic which occupied a very significant place in philosophy of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Because, in dialectic, particularly in Socratic dialectic, what happens that if someone comes out with a thesis, then Socrates will bring an antithesis, then there will be a discussion go forward, and they arrive at some point of a definition or concept which we are going to discuss later on. Besides, they have developed a pragmatic approach to knowledge and truth. They believed since absolute truth is not attainable, the relative knowledge would help the individual in conducting affairs in his daily life. It was revived in form of pragmatism in recent times. So this is how sophists conducted their philosophy. But what is the major landmark of this, of the major contribution of this brand of philosophers called sophists? That they actually made a departure from the natural philosophy, and they focused on the on the study of man, his nature, and the socio-ethical issues, socio-political issues. As I have told you that there are two stages in the development of Greek philosophy. One stage that is represented by all the where their focus is only on the inquiry of nature, and here another brand of philosophy, they just made a departure and concentrate on the philosophy of man. Now there comes actually in this situation, during this period in which the sophists have exerted considerable influence among the aspirant youths, the cognitive enterprise in Greece was leading to a chaotic intellectual environment, as there was a degradation of reason at the cost of senses. Because in the time of Socrates, a sophist, reason was just pushed to a backseat, and senses got a very prominent place in understanding in whatever they try to understand or try to teach. In order to restore the glorious moral and intellectual tradition of the ancient Greece, a paradigm shift was inevitable. Someone need to guide the masses to see everything in proper perspective, and in this situation, the emergence of Socrates took place in the horizon of Greek thought. He turned out to be a greatest figure though he belonged to a very humble background because his mother was a midwife and his wife is a vegetable seller. But he was instrumental in shaping the thinking of philosophers who dominated the Western intellectual tradition for centuries to come. Socrates, in fact, had not left anything in writing, as you know. He indeed lives in the pages of Plato's dialogues. When Plato was a young man and directly taking lessons from him. There are also some account of Socrates found in the works of Aristotle and also in the writings of Xenophanes. Of course, that is from a historical point of view, not Xenophanes' Memorabilia. Work is called Memorabilia. That is written from a historical point of view, not a philosophical point of view. But his philosophical doctrine, his philosophical thinking was found in the writings of Plato and Aristotle. As a result, we have merely the Platonic Socrates. It is believed by a majority of the scholars that all the earlier dialogues of Plato, where he was the protagonist, do represent the actual view of Socrates than the latter dialogues. Actually, Plato has written everything in the form of dialogues. And he has written nearly 30 dialogues, and all the dialogues have been classified into three stages and three parts. That is the earlier dialogues, the middle dialogues, and the later dialogues. So in middle dialogues, it is called dialogue because he has written in the form of as we have seen in the different natak, these drama that people are speaking their playwright, speaking their versions from the different mouths. So likewise, all the Platonic works are expressed in dialogue form. So in all the earlier dialogues, Plato was speaking what Socrates was actually about to say on certain issues, because Plato is a direct student of Socrates, and he was taking direct lessons from. He was the person who makes note of what Socrates was telling to his companions or to his interlocutors. So aligning with this prevailing dissatisfaction against the natural philosophy and in opposition to the subjectivity of the sophist, on the one hand, he also feels that the natural philosopher really neglected the issues, the question related to the human being, and he also at the same time he also not agreed with the sophist that knowledge is a mere matter of subjectivity. And Socrates engaged himself primarily pursuing the nature of ethical virtues. So as I have told that his focus was on the issues that related to human being and his conduct in society and state. So his total focus, because he has a feeling that why do actually we try to understand nature unless our inquiry of nature is harnessed with the benefit of the well-being of human being, then any inquiry is incomplete or partial. That's why he tried to bring to keep the man at the center of his inquiry. And of course, he did speak of something, physics and biology, yet he left it for Aristotle to develop in subsequent times. Firstly, his concern was twofold. Socrates' concern was twofold. Firstly, striving for concepts and striving for definitions of virtue, while the method characteristic is characteristically his own. He has his own method of doing it. These are his doctrine of logic and virtue that led to all the subsequent idealism we have come across in the Western philosophical tradition. Actually, he did so with the conviction and with the firm faith in the power of reason to meet the practical difficulties of his time. His prime objective not to construct a system of philosophy, like all the philosophers of Western traditions, say Descartes and other, they try to build a system. But Socrates does not have that, ambition, does not have that concern for a system. But he wanted to create an awareness among the masses, the love for truth and virtue, to help them to think right in order to live right. Thus, his purpose was practical rather than speculative. He had not propounded any theory as such, but practiced a method and lived by it, and lived it by example, and he taught this to others. While sophists were tinkering with the changing aspect of things, Socrates sought to go behind the changes and strove to go beneath the changes and find the unchanging behind the changing. However, number of characteristics a man may have, there must be something which makes a man as man, even if he is rid of his individual characteristics, which remains and found common to all men is the concept of man. This is how he has given an idea of a concept. I mean, the basic characterization of a concept. The very emphasis on the role of concepts in comprehending truth and virtues was the prime and fundamental objective of Socrates. Though this may sound quite hackneyed or very repetitive, it said the future course of philosophy, and it was a major landmark in the evolution of philosophy in general and ethics in particular. This is rather a precursor to Platonic and Aristotelian doctrine that all knowledge involves universal judgment and it is conceptual by nature. The discovery of concept was a major contribution of Socrates. He could have applied it in different realms, but he left it. He could have applied it, as I have told, in physics or biology, but he left this to Aristotle, and Plato brought out its mathematical implications. Now the question arises: this is the problem before the Socrates, and how he want to address this problem. He in fact tried to address this problem by giving a methods which we call Socratic methods, or the Greek word for this is an Elenctic methods. Let us discuss something about this method, how it operates. Socrates was, as we have discussed, that he was highly dissatisfied with the sophist method of heuristic or rhetorics, and which was nothing but a win at any price type argument, aiming not at a positive conclusion, which is the objective of Socrates. The heuristic method, uh, employing the technique of doxology, as I have told earlier, the doxology is a technique that which can argue both ways with equal force. Socrates felt that the heuristic method was philosophically barren and lacked the scientific aim and educational and moral values of any genuine inquiry. It was not concerned with establishment of truth. It has failed to teach virtue as a moral excellence, which was the objective of Socrates. And the focus, yes, according to Socrates, genuine inquiry must aim at establishing the truth. He tried to find out a definition for all the ideas and concepts related to morality. For him, a correct definition can be found only by the thorough exercise of reason, not by unfounded opinion, as the sophists did believe. In order to achieve this objective, he engaged himself in a dialogue and question-answer process with a cross-section of people, particularly with those who claim to be the authority or expert in their respective fields of morality. He tests their his Elenctic method was primarily designed to test the assertion of these so-called experts by the help of illustration taken from everyday life, showing wherever necessary that they are not well-founded and are in need of modification and correction. He tries to elicit a correct opinion from the interlocutors. Interlocutors means with whom he is engaged in an argument. The other peoples are said to be the interlocutors. He tries to elicit the correct opinion from the interlocutors and carry forward the dialogue till he arrives at a correct definition, putting it to the test of further and further questioning. Thus here, the aim is to discover the essential characteristics of the subject to be defined, to reach a clear and distinct notions and concepts, and to make people aware of their ignorance so that they can easily arrive at the definition they wanted to arrive at. Must they? It can be this method can be pursued in clear and reasoned thinking in the light of some principle, that is archaics. To attain knowledge and truth, he employs a method that is method of Elenctus or Elenctic method. This is a method. It is primarily a Socratic method, and the Greek word for this method I have told that is called Elenctic method or the method of Elenctus. Let us first discuss the structure of this method, how this method proceeds, how this method operates. It operates in a sequence. First, Socrates considered his interlocutors' belief B believes capital B is to be false. So he wants to refute, he wants to reject this belief. For the second step, this is the first step. Suppose someone, because he was discussing about different virtue, definition of different virtues. Suppose he wanted to discuss the virtue of honesty or the virtue of courage, temperance, piety, so on and so forth. So he will first consult a person who claims himself to be the expert in piety or in whatever virtue he claims to be. So Socrates considered the interlocutor's belief B to be false. This is first thing that he wanted to reject, to refute, to show the weakness of this belief of his intellectual. Suppose we call it capital B. Then the second step would be, he would bring another thesis or assertion X and Y. He will bring, just he was discussing about B and belief B, and now he will bring another thesis or assertion that X and Y. This new thesis X and Y is tested by all kind of possible questioning, and Socrates sought the agreement of each interlocutor about this thesis. This thesis Q, X and Y is very popularly and very well tested thesis, in well accepted thesis in the society, or among every people. Among all the people, it was accepted, and there was hardly any disagreement over this thesis. The third step, that Socrates would argue that the assertion X and Y entail the negation of B, that is not B, to which he secures the agreement of the interlocutor. First, Socrates wanted to refute the thesis, the belief B. Then he would bring another thesis, popular thesis, to which the interlocutor agrees, and it is a very established thesis, that X and Y. And from X and Y, he deduce the something that is negation of B or not B. Then the Socrates would argue that since not B is derived from true proposition, not B is derived from true proposition, a true proposition, established proposition, so not B is true, as whatever is derived from a true proposition is also true. So if not B is true, then B is false, and thus Socrates reject the belief of his interlocutor, which was accepted as B. But here Socrates has given absolute liberty to his interlocutor. Suppose an interlocutor does not like any consequence, does not accept that this XY does not really entail not B, then what Socrates will do, that he will change, he will replace X and Y and bring P and Q. So he goes on repeating this process till he arrives not B. Okay, once he arrived at not B and he secures the agreement of the interlocutor, then obviously not B is true because it is derived from a true propositions. So not true propositions. So if not B is true, then B, the initial belief, that is false. By employing this convincingly, by employing convincingly the above method of Elenchus, Socrates tried to help the precise and consistent thinking to ensure correct definition of moral ideas and concepts. It brings to light many contradictions in the views of so-called experts and on moral matters. It clarifies the meaning of common Greek moral terms and points out the delicate aspects which are valuable for the understanding of moral problems. He argues that if knowledge is to be achieved, an essential first step is the realization that one does not know what one claims to know. So this is the very important claim of Socrates, that this method helps one. This methods, if correctly applicable, and if one sincerely try to know what knowledge or what the knowledge of virtue is, and what exactly virtue is all about, then he must realize that what he does not know about that particular moral concepts. So that's why he claims in a dialogue, Phaedo, he claims that I am more intelligent. He tells to Phaedo that, look, I am more intelligent than you because you know what you know, but I know what I don't know. This is a very important claim of Socrates, and which has a far-reaching consequences. And suppose, let us take an example. In this context, Socrates has also said, which is very popular, that that the statement that an unexamined life is not worth living. This is very popular. So everything that you have in life, all the views, all the things, all the beliefs, all the knowledge you have, it has to pass through a thorough investigation or examination. Let us take Socrates has given all the examples, in various examples, how these methods help us to arrive at some views, some correct views about the moral concept. For example, in his dialogue Charmanides, he was discussing with Charmanides, because Charmanides was an interlocutor in the dialogues. He was discussing with Charmanides about the concept of temperance. Temperance was discussed and sought to arrive at a correct definition in that dialogue. Temperance is a typical Greek virtue, so balanced and so harmonious. First, he made his interlocutor agree that temperance could not be quietness, nor modesty, nor doing our own business, nor even doing of good action, nor self-knowledge. He succeeded to persuade his interlocutor to agree that basic thing in life is knowledge of good and evil. The temperance by itself cannot be understood, and it could be understood through other things which he had, in opposition to other things which he had just mentioned. Let us discuss some characteristics of Socratic methods, distinctive features of Socratic methods. Firstly, it seems to be apparently seems to be negative and skeptical, as Socrates pretend to be ignorant, and in his dialogues he never comes out with a very concrete suggestion or concrete or definite definition of those values, but he simply guides people to understand for themselves what a definite value, definite concept, ethical concept is all about. Socrates pretend himself to be ignorant about that concept. That's why it gives an impression that Socrates is the Socratic method is quite negative in character, and he's quite a skeptic. But here, ignorance is apparent, as I have told. In fact, it drives him to reach the drives not only him, it drives all the interlocutors, all the masses to reach at the correct definition of the ethical concept. So it cannot be called skepticism as such. Secondly, it is oral in nature, undertaken in a conversational mode with cross section of people coming from different walks of life. Thirdly, it is conceptual and definitional. Its purpose is to arrive at a correct definition of abstract ethical concepts like justice, courage, piety, honesty, equality, and so on and so forth. Fourthly, it relies on observation and experience, but experience of particular instances by which he rejects the opinions and views of the so-called experts in the field of ethics. So it seems to be inductive in nature. Fifthly, it is a deductive. It is having a deductive character, since here a given definition is tested by drawing consequences from a particular belief or particular thesis. So these are the characteristics that it is Socratic method is not a very it is not a skeptical one. It's not a negative, as it apparently seems to be. It is conversational. It is undertaken in conversational mode, or it is oral in nature, and it is also definitional, and it is an attempt to explain what a concept is all about. And fifthly, latter, and lastly but not the least, that it is a very combination. It's a very wonderful combination of induction and deduction. Of course, deduction and induction took concrete shape in Aristotle's works of prior analytics and post analytics. The Eleatic method of Socrates is really a major contribution to the logic of philosophical inquiry. It paved the way for Plato's dialectic and development of Aristotle's logic. As I have told that latter, Aristotle has developed this, and given it a form of logic. Now, one of the another aspect that why he has developed this method. His purpose behind developing this method is ethical one. And let us discuss a bit about the definitions, about his views on ethics. The objective of Socratic ethics is to apply the definitional knowledge to the problem of morality and to discover the rational basis of our conduct in society or state. He strove to understand the meanings of morality, to discover the rational principle of what is right and what is wrong. The question which are in the focus of his concern was, how shall we order our life? What are the rational ways of living? How should we conduct our life in the society? And more importantly, what is the ultimate good of life? These are the concerns, these are the focus of Socrates' ethical inquiry. According to Socrates, knowledge is the highest good. In fact, the Socratic assertion, virtue is knowledge or knowledge is virtue, the hallmark of his ethics. It states true knowledge is the foundation of philosophic statecraft. It implies that there is an objective good to be known and that it can in fact be known by rational and logical investigation rather than by intuition, guesswork, opinion or chance. The good is objectively real, whatever anybody thinks about it, irrespective of what we think what is good, but rule is good is objectively real. It ought to be realized not because man want it, but because it is good. So Socrates himself says that something is true, not because Socrates is saying it to be so, but because it is true. So truth is quite objective in nature, and it is beyond any spatio-temporal relation as the sophists hold it to be. Thus, knowledge is a necessary and sufficient condition of virtue. Without knowledge, virtue is impossible, and its possession ensures virtuous actions. Sometimes it is also held by one of the very ancient scholar, Ovid, that we see better and we see better and aware of it, but we do the worse. But Socrates responded it by holding that if only a man knows what is right, he could not possibly fail to act accordingly. If men fail to act, they should act as what they should do. It is their misfortune even more than an error of Socrates. So, Socrates, this is besides, if knowledge is virtue, then according to Socrates, virtue must be taught. Like knowledge, as you know, knowledge can be taught by different methods and techniques. So also the virtue, if at all it is at par with the knowledge. Socrates, virtue must be taught, and like again, it is a reflexive relation between virtue and knowledge implies that all kinds of virtue is one, and there is a unity of virtue. This is all about Socrates' ethics, but since there is not much, work done by Socrates himself in writing, so whatever idea about the Socrates we get through the writings of Plato and Aristotle, and our idea of Socrates, our idea about Socrates' methods, his theory of knowledge, and his ethics will be more clear when we discuss Plato and Aristotle. So this is what about Socrates. And if Om, hello, Om.
Hello, sir. Yes, sir.
If time permits, we can discuss something about Plato, or we'll do it tomorrow.
You can take it for another 10-15 minutes.
Let us have a discussion on this, then we will proceed. Okay.
So should we end here? Should we end here?
Let's end here, or let's end here. Tomorrow we'll continue with Plato and Aristotle. Okay.
Okay, okay. So we
Or
had huh, anything to say?
okay,
Yes, sir.
Huh.
Yes, sir.
So today we are ending the lecture here. Tomorrow we'll have the further lecture from Professor Mohin Mohammed. Now I request Debasis Sarangi to take on the questions in the chat box and start the interactive session.
Yes. Thank you very much, sir, for a very lucid explanation of Socratic philosophy. One first question is from Ratnakar Gajendra. Sir, is it audible?
yeah, it is audible.
Yeah, Ratnakar Gajendra has asked that for sophist, what is true for me is not true for others. Truth is subjective. Will this position of sophist lead to solipsism? Initially, the philosophy of Descartes leads to solipsism, but that is not the primary aim of Descartes. Please explain.
Yeah, Descartes actually, it is, I would not call it a solipsism. Rather, it is a relativistic approach to truth or to knowledge. Descartes also initially people allege that Descartes also like that, but Descartes' purpose was, to arrive at a positive assertion of certainty. But here also, Socrates, his purpose is not that you believe it because I am saying so. He said that we just believe it or we know it because it is true. We believe it to be true because it is true, not because Socrates says so or anyone says so. So it is not a solipsism like Descartes. Like Descartes, it has a positive implications. So solipsism cannot be attributed to Socrates.
Okay, thank you, sir. The next question is from Bhagyasri Patnaik. She wants to know what is virtue ethics of Socrates.
Actually, virtue ethics is of Aristotle. It is not of Socrates, and it is of Aristotle. Actually, we'll discuss it in detail when we come to Aristotle.
Then Smriti Mai Basantia, she wants to know one does not know what he does know. What does it mean?
Yeah. This is a very important meaning because our knowledge is quite finite. We have a limited intellect. We cannot comprehend all the aspects of the truth. So I must, unless I know what I don't know, I cannot take an initiative to know things. Okay. So first this will drive you and to know what exactly the thing is. So it is basic requirements that you must be aware of ignorance. Otherwise, you may take your ignorance as the knowledge. So this is the purpose behind telling that I know because I know what I don't know. You know what you know.
Okay, sir. The next question is from K.O. Narayan Rao, sir. Why did Socrates attempt to falsify the beliefs? What purpose did it serve?
Yeah. Which is this is he was trying to falsify the beliefs of the sophists because the sophists they don't have a objective belief. They always have a subject element of subjectivity in their enterprise or in their business. So unless unless we get rid of this subjective, we cannot arrive at the true knowledge. I mean, as knowledge of ethical of any concept, ethical or whatever it is. So he needs to falsify those beliefs which are particularly those beliefs which are based on the subjectivity or relativity.
Yes, sir. Then next question is Socrates tried to find the unchanging behind the changing. What is the unchanging principle?
Yeah, unchanging principle is, suppose, uh, the necessary, suppose a concept, okay, you have to suppose the concept of man, okay, what makes a man as man? This is the things. So this is a very good example. It is given in Theaetetus, where Socrates asked Theaetetus to tell what knowledge is. What knowledge is. So Theaetetus just replied by giving certain examples that look, geometry is a knowledge, physics is a knowledge, mathematics is a knowledge, and these are the knowledge. Uh, but Socrates told him that no, I don't expect you to answer by enumerating the examples or by giving by taking the particular instances. What I want you to tell me, what exactly make mathematics as mathematics? What exactly make a man as man? What exactly make a table as table? This is that means he wanted to just find out the necessary and sufficient conditions, what makes a thing what it is. This is behind this is the purpose behind falsifying it. Yes.
Next question is all kind of virtue is one. What does it mean?
Yes.
All kind of virtue.
Yes. Because yes, all the virtues are one. There is a unity of virtue. This is a very obvious implication of his enterprise, Socratic enterprise. Because you see, knowledge means rational knowledge. Okay. And virtue is knowledge. Virtue is objective, knowledge is objective. So whatever virtue you choose, there are various copious number of virtues like honesty, piety, equality, justice, liberty, and so many things, so many virtues. So all virtues, Socrates was striving for the essence, for the necessary and sufficient condition of these virtues, and this necessary and sufficient conditions, are conditions for all virtues are similar. I mean, process is similar. That's why there is a unity in virtue. Because again, all these virtues they aim at the realization of good, highest good. That is why Socrates say that there is a unity of virtues.
Okay, sir. Then Bhagyasri Patnaik wants to know what is the exact meaning of Socrates.
Exact meaning of
Socratic.
Exact meaning of Socrates.
Yeah.
Socrates is a proper name.
Yeah.
Socrates is just like your name is Bhagyasri. Socrates is a name which he has inherited from his parents.
And then Sulakna Chaudhary wants to know, can we call Socrates a humanist?
Of course, he is a humanist because his total focus on the well-being of man, how he meet his difficulties in personal life. Because why he departed from these earlier predecessors. He departed because their inquiry into nature is of no use unless it is harnessed with the well-being of man. Because after all, why do you inquire about nature unless it is of some use to the mankind? So his total focus, total concern is the upliftment of human being affairs. So upliftment of human conditions to get the better of their conditions rather. And so in this sense, he is a person, his philosophy is totally committed to the development or well-being of mankind as a whole. That is why, in this respect, I think he can be called a humanist in true sense of the term.
Yeah. The next question is, Socrates discussed about metaphysics, but his primary aim is to define ethical model with the help of common men. Please clarify.
Yeah, metaphysics, actually, it is also a perspective held by others, so many philosophers. But I never see Socrates' inquiry in the framework of metaphysics, in the perspective of metaphysics. I rather see that he has inherited a method of, method from his predecessors, that to inquire something rationally, to inquire into the things of nature by a systematic method, systematic rationalizations. So, metaphysics, it is. I don't agree. I'm sorry. I'm afraid I don't agree that he has a metaphysical principle in his mind while dealing with the ethical issues.
Yeah.
It can be shown. Of course, if it is pretty difficult to find out the necessary and sufficient condition of for a ethical concepts, for the definition of a ethical concept, but it is not impossible, as Plato has shown it to be in his different methods, in his dialectics, which we'll be discussing.
Yeah. Then Priti Manjari Khuntia wants to know how virtue can be taught according to Socrates.
Yes. Virtue is knowledge. This is his assumptions. Virtue is knowledge. And don't you think that knowledge can be taught? Knowledge can be taught. If knowledge can be taught, virtue also can be taught by adopting a particular, methods, Eleatic method or hypothetical method or dialectical method, or whatever methods Socrates pursues.
Yeah. Next question is, if Socrates' method fails to refute a belief, then how would his method work?
Yes. Actually, what is the purpose? The method always leads to a purpose, to the achievement of a purpose. Okay. And Socrates refutes belief which are not in consonance with the knowledge. Okay. Those beliefs, it is actually against the sophist. He was primarily refuting the views of Socrates, sophists, which are quite relative in nature, which are quite subjective in nature. They are perspective oriented. That is why he tried to refute or reject those beliefs in order to arrive at a correct definition of the ethical concepts.
Yes. The next question is, as Socrates said that knowledge is virtue, does it mean that there is a necessary relation between knowing good and doing good?
Of course, it is not a necessary relation, because if I know good, I know what is good, but I may not choose to do what I feel to be good, what I know to be good. I am at absolute liberty to not to do what I know to be good. So one can do it, but one can do it at the risk of its own life, or own way of life, or own problems. It is not the problem of Socrates. It is not the error of Socratic methods. Okay.
Yeah. Next question is, how does Socrates explain moral values in his Elenchus method? is there different ways in which he explains about it?
Pardon, just repeat the question.
How does Socrates explain moral values in his Elenchus method?
Yes.
Is there different ways in which he explains about it?
Actually, there is another methods. Socrates primarily, actually, what we assume that Socrates Socrates thought was reflected in Plato's earlier dialogue. Okay, and in earlier dialogues, like for example, Euthyphro, Phaedo, and Gorgias, all these dialogues are earlier dialogues in which Elenctic method is extensively used. Okay, that is why we hope and we just assume that Socrates essentially has the Elenctic method. Later, Plato developed his Elenctic method into the method of hypothesis and another method, that is method of collection and division. Okay, and which will be these are a pretty long methods. I mean, we will be discussing it tomorrow. Other methods apart from these Elenctic methods.
Okay, sir. The next question is Socrates' philosophy based on ethical notion of objective truth by rational appreciation, but not by intuition or by chance? So, is there any spiritual notion in Socrates?
Is there any? Is there, just repeat? Is there any?
Is there any spiritual notion in Socrates?
No. Actually, this is the characteristics of characteristic of Greek philosophers. They do their philosophy independent of any divine intervention. Yes, there are some spirits because he sometimes Plato talked about the transmigration of soul or other things, but there is no traces of spiritualism as such in Socratic way of doing philosophy.
Yeah.
If at all, it is very peripheral, but it is not the prime focus of Socrates.
Yeah. And next question is: was Socrates a realist?
A realist? He is he is primarily an idealist. Okay, and of course he is to some extent he's a realist because he tested his claims by referring or by taking the help from some particular instances of our daily life.
Yeah. Then Deepak Kumar wants to know, do sophists have some constructive contribution to the society?
Constructive?
Do sophists have some constructive contribution to the society?
Yeah, their contribution, they don't have a far-reaching, contribution to philosophy. But later I say that their contribution helped Plato and Aristotle and subsequent philosophers to develop a dialectic where a thesis, then there will be counter antithesis, and this is kind of things that help Plato, Aristotle, Hegel, and some other philosophers to develop a kind of dialectic method. Secondly, their contribution lies in their contribution leads to a pragmatic approach to life. James was while giving his theory of truth, he admitted that he was considerably influenced. He has some influence of Socrates. So in these two ways, they have some kind of contribution, if at all. This is called these are called contributions to the history of philosophy.
Okay, sir. Next question asked by Rasmi Prabha. She wants to know how we communicate knowledge according to Gorgias.
How we communicate?
Communicate knowledge according to Gorgias.
Gorgias says that we cannot, Gorgias is a sophist. He is known for his negativity or nihilistic approach. He says that nothing exists. We cannot know anything. If at all something exists, we cannot know about it. And if we don't know, then how can we communicate? We cannot communicate to others. So whatever whatever we believe, and we'll just do it. And we cannot just communicate what we think or what because nothing existed. Nothing exists. This is Gorgias. This is a very negative argument. This is what Gorgias' assertion of it.
Yeah. Next question again from K. Om Narayan Rao. To my understanding, in the Socratic method, a problem is taken by analyzing the problem to a series of questions. In answering these questions lies the solution of the problem. How do you see it?
Just repeat just missed the question.
Yeah. To my understanding, in the Socratic method, a problem is taken by analyzing the problem to a series of questions. In answering, analyzing the problem to a series of questions.
Yes, series of questions. Fine.
Yeah. In answering this question lies the solution of the problem. How do you see this?
No, actually, he wanted just in Socrates' method of question answer. This is primarily designed to test the truth value of a particular propositions, particular belief, and he just I don't know whether he himself tells that he doesn't know, he is ignorant about the answer, about this belief, but he conduct an argument in such a way that the said belief, the belief in question or the proposition in question, by putting it to the test of questioning and eliciting further answer from the interlocutor, he comes to a conclusion. He comes to a conclusion that will guide the interlocutor to come to arrive at the real definition of the concept, of the ethical concept primarily.
Yeah. The next question is Socrates against empiricism?
Yes, empiricism is experience does not have much role to play in Socrates, except that he tests the refutation of the beliefs, by referring to the instances from our daily life. So this is the only use of experience in his philosophical activity. Otherwise, his philosophy is dominated by reason. Reason, he has absolute faith in the power of reason to give him the correct definition and the understanding of a concept.
Then Amrita Haldar wants to know what is known as Socratic irony.
What is Socrates?
Irony.
Yes, irony that irony is that it is Socrates not a fool, he knows everything, but he pretends that he doesn't know, so that the interlocutor come out with answer, and by eliciting further questioning, further answer from the interlocutor, he comes to a definitions. So this is called, although he knows, but he says that he is ignorant. This is the irony of Socrates. This is called Socratic irony.
Yeah. Next question is, rhetoric was aimed at winning the debate without any concern for truth. In what way then rhetoric can be useful?
Rhetoric it is just an art of winning argument. Okay, and winning an argument by dragging the opponent to certain confusion and putting him in a net of fallacies. Okay, so rhetoric doesn't contribute knowledge, although it teaches you how to win an argument, how to excel in public life. Okay, public life means, I mean, in politics, in winning election. Okay, this is what rhetoric contributed, if at all it has any contribution.
Yeah. Then Vijay Kumar Naik wants to know, knowledge is virtue. Is it an analytic statement?
Yeah, for Socrates it is analytic statement. For Socrates it is analytic statement, but for others it is not so. It is quite doubtful whether other will accept it or not, because it can be seen from other perspective also. But for Socrates it is an analytic purpose.
Okay. Then Sasmita Bisoi,
Yeah.
Sasmita Bisoi asked, which type of knowledge is called virtue?
Rational knowledge, objective and rational knowledge is called virtue. This is we have just discussed.
Yeah. Then Pragyan Daskanungo asked, is it not difficult to accept Socrates' view that a man who intentionally does wrong is better than a man who does it unintentionally? How did he justify it?
It is again, it is just like it is to be better Socrates be a fool and pig. Oh, it is not like that. What again? Just repeat the question.
Is it not difficult to accept Socrates' view that a man who intentionally does wrong is better than a man who does it unintentionally? How did he justify it?
No. Actually, knowledge is always there. The man who knows, if he knows, Socrates believed that if a man knows, although instantly he does the opposite, okay, he will rectify himself if at all he has the knowledge. So he is always have a better chance of rectifying himself. But the man who doesn't have knowledge, cannot able to understand it in a proper perspective. So the man, although he has done a wrong thing knowingly, but his knowledge would help him to get over his misdemeanor. So man with knowledge is always better than man, although he knows than a man who does not have knowledge. So knowledge is quite important, and that is why Socrates will never subscribe to the view that a man who does not have knowledge, and is the man who has knowledge is certainly better than the man who does not have knowledge.
Yeah. Then Smritimai Basantya asked, does Socrates accept only argumentative or dialectic method?
Argumentative
or dialectic method? Does Socrates accept only
realistic method?
Dialectic.
Reality.
Dialectic. D-I-A.
Dialectic. Sir, it is dialectic.
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 Socratic method is a dialectic.
Yeah, I think does Socrates accept only argumentative or dialectic method?
Yeah, dialectic method, argumentative method. Dialectic is conducted through the argumentation. Okay, so dialectic and the argumentation is a part of dialectic. Okay, so I think argument is quite important. It plays an important role in dialectic. So there is no opposition between argumentation and dialectic.
Yeah. The next question is, can we call Socrates the father of epistemological rationalism?
Yes, we may call it, but it is not very systematic. Rather, we can call Plato as the father of, because he has given a systematic exposition of knowledge. Okay, that is why it will not be fair to call him the father of epistemology, or rather, the place is reserved for Plato.
Yeah. So if any question left, then you can unmute yourself and ask question directly. Any clarification question, if left, then you can unmute yourself and ask.
सर प्रणाम सर
Okay,
मु
go.
आदित्य नारायण बारिक कहूली सर फॉर सॉक्रेटिस नॉलेज इज प्राइमरली सब्जेक्टिव
Primarily subjective. Socrates. Socrates, man.
यस सर नो सर
Socrates,
सफिस्ट
yes. Then what happened?
सर व्हाई दे एक्सेप्टेड
Who accepted it?
सर सफिस्ट
Because their business is that they want to, the technique, they adopt the technique of doxology. They argue both sides. Because they wanted to win an argument. Okay, their purpose is not to arrive at truth, and they argue for the sake of argument only, without having any genuine concern for truth. तांको पाके माने सत्यର कौनसी मायना नहीं तांको पाके. Okay, they don't have any concern, anything to do with the truth. They only teach how. So winning an argument is it's obviously depending upon the both way argumentation, the subjectivity. What objectivity is one. Okay, but
Yes,
here sophist is to win an argument. So their concern is not truth, and subjectivity cannot lead us to truth.
ओके सर थैंक यू सर
Any others? Anyone left? Or will we continue?
So thank you, Devasis Sarangi, for taking this question and answer session quite nicely. Now, I think the entire lecture was very nice, and still more beautiful is the question and answer session. The way Professor Mohammed took the questions and tried to answer the questions, I really enjoyed, and many of my doubts got clarified, and hope many of the participants might have also got their doubts clarified. So overall, I can say today's session was quite useful and a successful one, and we look forward for the next session on the post-Socratic philosophy tomorrow. So with these words, I thank Professor Mohin Mohammed for such a beautiful lecture, and the way he carried on answered the questions during the question and answer hour. Now I request Devasis Sarangi to propose a formal vote of thanks.
Yeah, it has been very fascinating lecture, and Professor Mohammed has explained his view very lucidly and very logically. Thank you very much, sir. And my heartfelt thanks also goes to Professor K.O. Narayan Rao for coordinating the session, and Mr. Pramod Kumar Das and whole family members, and those who asked question here also. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you very much.
So the meeting is over now, and
Thank
looking
you.
forward for meeting is over, and looking